Hello and welcome to Vienna to the Global Aqua Days of DSM Firmenich. My name is Moritz Müller. I'm the Managing Director of the Fish side. We're here today with Pamela Nath from the Sustainable Shrimp Partnership. Pamela, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here in this event organized by DSM. Actually, DSM is one of our associate members since 2 years, so very excited, to be sharing here our story on Sustainable Shrimp Partnership, and also learn more about, the solutions and all the research they are doing to put best solutions in the market to improve the performance of different industries.
Yeah, very good. Do you like a little living room here?
I love it.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's very peaceful, so
yeah, very good. You feel at home?
Yeah,
Okay,
totally comfortable.
That's very important. Tell me a little about yourself. What's your journey into aquaculture and how did you arrive here in this chair today?
Yes, well, I arrived specifically in aquaculture in 2017, when I was hired to be the director of the Sustainable Shrimp Partnership. Previous to that, I used to work in the promotion of production sectors in Ecuador. I was in charge of managing the country brand, Ecuadorian country brand, to promote exports, to promote investment, and promote tourism for Ecuador. And in this experience, I had the pleasure to get to know more productive sectors in Ecuador. That was my first approach to the aquaculture industry. I also had the opportunity to work with the banana sector, with tuna, with flowers, and that led me to work specifically on aquaculture, which I find an amazing industry.
Great. Can I ask you, what is your background?
My background is in communications and marketing. Yes, I'm not a technical expert. I have a team dedicated for that. Of course, I have learned a lot about shrimp, but yes, my background is more on the marketing branding side.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Great. So the Sustainable Shrimp Partnership, SSP, what is it all about?
The Sustainable Shrimp Partnership is a pre-competitive platform that get together different shrimp producers. Currently, all of the producers are in Ecuador. And they, as I mentioned, in 2018, they launched this initiative because they felt that it was necessary to set an example, in the global shrimp industry, that you can indeed produce shrimp in a sustainable way, complying with the best social, environmental practices, delivering premium quality, but also delivering safe and healthy products for consumers. So these producers got together because they felt that it was necessary to work in the marketplace. The global shrimp industry is a commodity market, and there is no enough differentiation, for clients, for consumers. And despite that, Ecuadorians have been producing for more than 50 years, at the end, there is not enough recognition on all the stories and all the effort and investment behind a box of shrimp. We didn't realize, and that happened to me before, getting to know deep about the industry, that I didn't ask enough questions about the products that I previously acquired. But now it's like I know everything that is behind the box of shrimp, that I want to tell the story to everyone, because it is deserved to be told.
50 years of shrimp production is quite a number. Did you have a big shrimp party at the Jubilee?
Well, we try to celebrate by even, you know, trying to find even more ways to make our industry better. You know,
Yeah.
in these 50 years, you can see an evolution of the industry, and I'm totally sure that Sustainable Shrimp Partnership is part of that evolution. You know, they are ready to share their experience to the world through this collaboration. You know, because it's through SSP, it's not about just working on Ecuador, on working on producers, because we want to generate a change at a global scale. And for that, you need to share your experience, you know, so other actors can get involved, you know, can get engaged and start addressing other topics, you know, other challenges. Maybe are not the same challenges as the ones that we have in Ecuador, but you know, everyone have challenges, and everyone have opportunities to get better. So that's one of our main objectives, you know, to raise the bar, you know, to commit everyone for a race to the top on the industry.
Right,
Yeah.
and we get to that race to the top in a moment. Ecuador, for a few years now, has been, as well as the biggest producer, the biggest exporter of shrimp in the world.
Yeah.
But from what I know, the average farm in Ecuador does differ quite a lot from the average farm of the rest of the main producing countries in Southeast Asia and India. Can you elaborate a little bit on that difference?
Yes. Well, the difference is that in Ecuador we have semi-intensive production systems, right? So this means that we have natural ecosystems. Yeah, as we say, the closest as the shrimp natural habitat. This has its advantages because you let the animal develop in its natural ecosystem. You know, shrimp it's an animal that can get stressed very easy. You know,
Yeah.
so what we try to do in Ecuador is that provide the best conditions for the animal to develop a superior quality. You know, we take care of stock densities. You know, and provide all the conditions for this animal. You know, to avoid stress. A stress can lead to the occurrences of disease. You know. And through SSP, we promote the zero use of antibiotics, you know. So instead of, you know, you need to, if you want to achieve that, you need to provide special care in every stage of the production cycle, so you can have a premium quality product, but also safe and healthy product.
That race to the bottom versus that race to the top you just mentioned.
Yeah.
These two concepts, can you elaborate on them?
Yes. Was one of the reasons and why SSP was created. It's because our producers, you know, our and exporters are aware of are aware of the products that are being offered in different markets. You know, they know about production practices. And as I mentioned, shrimp industry is a commodity market, you know, and sometimes there are actors that are willing to reduce costs, reduce prices, and that most of the time leads to the implementation of poor practices, environmental practices, social practices, and and even the misuse of antibiotics. So there's a constant looking for, to compete, on reducing costs, at expense of sacrificing, these priorities, and that has led the industry for a race to the bottom, and the thing is that consumers are not aware of this enough. They don't have enough awareness of this, and that also it's not even I forgot. Yeah, I forgot the word in English, but this is not. They have the right to know what they are acquiring, and sometimes the shrimp that they are acquiring is not even safe for them.
Right, transparency.
Yeah. Transparency, exactly. Transparency. They should know about what's behind the product. About the production practices that were used to produce, that shrimp. So instead of that, what we want through the SSP is encourage others for a race to the top, and it's not easy, it's not easy because you are setting like the bar, you try to set the bar very high, and it's an investment for our producers. It takes a lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of effort, but that's the way we should all go. Aquaculture has an enormous potential, to feed growing populations, but we must ensure that aquaculture is done in a right way. And what I feel is that you need someone in the industry to take that lead, Sometimes you want to, or you want to address specific challenges, but sometimes you don't know how, or you feel that the industry is not prepared to discuss topics as antibiotics and everything. But then you have some of our biggest producers in Ecuador talking about these topics in a very transparent way, and you see that these discussions now are taking place on other regions. And that's why we want to achieve through SSP. Not just working on Ecuador with our producers, but generate this discussion, making that, like put those ideas in their minds to start generating this conversation and trying to find solutions, to address specific topics.
Yeah. So where do you set that bar as SSP? I know one of your requirements, for instance, is an absolute zero tolerance towards antibiotics.
Yes.
What are those?
Yes. Well, when we were defining SSP, we needed to provide evidence of the compliance of good practices, because it's not enough on saying, that we comply, but we need to have constant evidence of that compliance, So in SSP, we verify the compliance for 4 criteria. All of our members, as an entry criteria, they have to be ASC certified. ASC is already a well-known, recognized certification, very strict on social and environmental aspects. And we, as SSP, put a special focus on 3 additional criteria, that at that time, we felt it was necessary to raise awareness and provide these constant additional evidence. The first one is they have to comply with a zero antibiotic policy. This means that they cannot medicate in any state, and instead provide the right conditions for the animal to avoid the occurrences of events or diseases. For this, we verify the compliance in each production cycle. You know, we organize through non-announced visits and through certified labs that they can go and take sample in the farms. They actually, the producers don't know which ponds will be, you know, selected for those tests. It's part of the surprise visit, you know, and we take sample of the animal during the growing phase, and this is important because this is not on end products to look for traces of antibiotic, but this is in the growing phase, so we can ensure that the product have not been the animal have not been medicated. We also have a neutral impact on water indicator. This means that we measure the water in and water out from that comes from the pond to ensure that we are using the right protocols and that you are not generating a negative impact on those ecosystems. And the third one is traceability. You know, provide transparent information on each stage of the production cycle, so you can ensure the implementation of the best practices and transparent data to our customers. This is very important, considering that 98% of Ecuadorian exports of Ecuadorian production, it's going to you know, more than 66 countries. So you need to provide that information in a very transparent way and share it to the clients. And in this specific topic, we partner with IBM to be part of their IBM Food Trust ecosystem and implement blockchain traceability for our shrimp. We started this project in 2019, and at that time, you know, people thought that the industry was, specifically the shrimp industry, was not ready to commit at these levels of transparency. Yeah, and we said, okay, challenge accepted. You know, yeah. And and it took us around. What at the beginning we thought that this was going to take us around 2 months. At the end, it took us around 1 year, 2 months.
That's pretty good. That's still pretty good.
Yeah, to implement this new technology. And it was a challenge because we were not just one company implementing, you know, doing the onboarding, but we work with different, you know, companies. And for IBM, it was the first time a shrimp was going to implement blockchain technology. We were the first shrimp implementing this. Yeah.
I also know you take this all the way through to the consumer level, right? So
yes.
We're a little bit short on time, so I'm gonna provide this info.
Yes.
Directly. I know that you can also trace this from the consumer side, right? So a consumer can see that transparency, has access to that blockchain.
Yeah.
You can see really where the shrimp come from, which I really think is quite fascinating. Now, you have quite a wide range of diverse actors on your SSP, as your SSP partners. Really. So you have feed companies, you have farmers on there, you have NGOs on there. How do you ensure that they all get what they are looking for?
Yeah. Well, when we created SSP, at the beginning we focus on shrimp producers. You know, so that's our founding members are all shrimp producers. But in this path, where we have been, you know, talking about the Sustainable Shrimp Partnership and, you know, reaching stakeholders, we realized that we have a lot of values and, you know, mission shared with other companies that are involved in the shrimp supply chain. Not necessarily doesn't produce a shrimp, but they are involved in the shrimp supply chain. So that's why some of these companies became associate members of SSP. And I think it is very important to have this type of members, you know, because as you mentioned, we have some of the main feed companies. You know, we have DSM, we have different companies, and they are leaders on their field, you know, and we need those insights from them in order to, you know, address other challenges. Because we as SSP cannot pretend just to address antibiotics and water and traceability, you know, for the upcoming years. What is sustainable right now, maybe in 2, 3, or 5 years is not enough. So we need to, you know, identify new challenges, and our partners help us on that, support us on that. The same with the NGOs, you know. WWF, the Sustainable Trade Initiative for the IDH from the Netherlands, and ASC are part of our advisory board members. You know, they have been working with us since day one, before even we launched the SSP, because you know you need the guidance for these organizations that have a wider, you know, a scope, like a wider overview of what are the challenges in the global market, you know, and set ambitious goals to fulfill those objectives, you know, to comply with those objectives.
Very good. Yes. I'd like to go on the farmer side. So if I'm a farmer and I want to join, but I know I've been basically farming in a way that is not compliant with your requirements, how do you help me join your program?
Yes. Well, we have different action fronts in Sustainable Shrimp Partnership. From one side, we work with our producers that are already complying with our criterions, but we also have what we call a scale-up program. You know, the same. We want to generate a change at the scale level. You know, so how can we translate these good practices and make them, you know, achievable for every farmer? You know, so we implement improvement projects for producers in Ecuador with the support of IDH and the WWF. We have implemented improvement projects for small producers as well. You know, because sometimes a small or mid-sized producer doesn't have enough resources to implement, you know, best practices or achieve international certifications that can make them be more competitive in international markets. So we support them on trainings, on audits, on different programs to make them also improve their practices, you know, at different levels. That's what we call scale-up levels. Of course, we want them to achieve the highest that could be SSP, but it takes you know, effort. So we want to ensure that they take one step at a time, you know, to make them to be sure that they feel very secure on what they are, you know, learning and implementing, and keep implementing those practices. You know.
Very good. It's a slow onboarding, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
And learning process until you're ready.
Yeah.
But Pamela, we're slightly running out of time, so I saved the very most important question for the end. Preferred shrimp recipe.
Preferred shrimp recipe. So I have 3 recipes. So I'm from Ecuador, so ceviche. It's one of our main dishes there, and actually the shrimp ceviche. You know, you can have it with different seafood, but shrimp ceviche is my favorite one. And also I have to say a garlic shrimp. Okay. Yeah.
Fried in the pan.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I love it.
Okay.
I love it. And something curious that I will share with you is that we always do like these tastings, you know, to once that you are involved in the shrimp industry, you learn how to identify premium quality shrimp, you know. So we always promote this recipe that is the easiest one. It's like if you have a premium quality shrimp, you just have to boil it for 3 minutes or
Okay.
180 seconds,
Okay.
you know? And you don't need to add anything, you know?
Okay.
You put the shrimp on 3 minutes in boiling water, you take out and you taste it,
All
you
right.
know? And you don't need anything, you know? Not sauces, no spices. You don't need to disguise the flavor if you have a
Perfect.
premium quality. So you must try that.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I need to get hold of some Ecuadorian shrimp.
Yes.
I'll
yes.
be calling you.
Yeah.
Pamela,
course.
it's been a real pleasure to having you. Thank you for all the insights and yeah, enjoy the
Thank you.
conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.